Alright, so apparently my flash drive filled up in the last video there, so you might have missed some of the stuff that I said. I just finished off the whip stitch, got down, and I started doing a standard stitch here. And notice how I still have quite a bit of thread left. Alright, still got quite a bit of thread left. That's good. Makes it easier to finish it off. But here I've got a loop from a standard stitch. It's coming out the back side here. I'm going to bring it back through in the same area as the loop, but leaving the loop there instead of pulling it tight. And what I'm going to do is pull it through there so it starts pulling the loop. Alright. So I've still got the loop there. And inside the loop I'm going to, now that it's come through the yellow again right here, I'm going to go through the loop once, twice, and if you're worried about it, loop it a third time, but any more than that, if you're getting nervous, it's just going to end up making it too much and you won't be able to tighten it down. Go ahead and just tighten it down, pull it tight. Just kind of, you can, sometimes it kind of gets finicky on you and you got to pull one thread at a time. That's okay. You just get yank on a little bit. If you yank too hard, it'll pop right off, and then you might need to backtrack the thread or something, but it's not too bad. And if you're worried about that, you don't feel comfortable with that, I'll just do another loop on top of it without going through it all. Go on that, and just put your finger on the knot and pull it tight. That should give you a little safety on there. And then trim it, and of course make sure when you're trimming it you leave a little bit on there just because you don't want to accidentally cut the knot. Okay? So there's my first one. First one put together. Notice how it's just on one side. The other side is still open. Okay? The reason for that is I'm going to do this again. Take my next piece here. It's going to go, remember, black and yellow, black and then yellow. So fold it over halfway. Notice the stitch is behind the fold. Fold it back there. And now you put your next piece of cloth on top of it. And you can see what's happened is I've now, if I turn it back over, I've got this new piece that I'm going to sew together right here. That's going to all get sewn together, right? Just like before. So if I want to do my 3 pins again, make it so that kind of sticks together where I want it to, and making sure it lines up is it's not super important. I mean, the better you get it lined up, the better it's going to be, but you can see here now I'm just going to sew all along that edge right there. Try to make it the same space away as these guys, okay? So one thing you can see I'm doing with my stitch, my next side here, is I actually started where the 2 stitches are in the same spot, so that way there's no gap at the end here, right? Moved it along all across this edge here, and I'm going to do the same thing here. This is a little bit different than how some of you did it last week, where you left an opening at both ends. I was thinking about it, and this might actually work better in the long term to closing it off. The trick is just going to be to make sure you don't accidentally get these 2 sides together, but also that so you can see I'm overlapping, getting them really tight next to each other before I come back and start doing the whip stitch. The only thing with this is if you cover up both the ends, then they're not ends that you can pull it inside out from or fill rice from. So on the very last piece, we're going to have to leave a small section of this area undone, not sewn at all, and we'll flip it through there, and then that's what we'll sew up on the outside. So instead of having a big cross across the top where we end up having to sew a bunch on the outside, we'll just have one small little section. It will look neater in the end. So now I'm just going to do my whip stitch all the way back, and remember, if your thread starts getting too short, tie it off wherever you're at, start it, thread it again, and just start it up a little bit behind it and then bring it back. there's no reason to try to force it to get to the end. Just stop wherever it is if your thread is too short. Okay? So you can see again, I'm just working on finishing up my whip stitch. The thing about it is it gets kind of crooked sometimes. That's okay. There. Now since I'm close to the other one, I'm making sure I'm not going through both like pieces, that they're still separate from each other. Alright. Yeah. I'm still doing good there. And I'm going to do just like I did before, where after my last whip stitch, I'm going to come back through with the standard stitch. Make sure it's nice and tight there. Make my loop. There's my loop. Pull it down tight. I like to use my thumb in there. Sorry, I'm getting a little low. I like to use my thumb in there to make sure it doesn't accidentally pull through. Back through one more time. Start pulling it around in once, twice, 3 times if you're nervous. And then pull it tight. One advantage of going down and then coming back is all your knots end up in the same spot, which just kind of makes it look a little bit nicer. Oh, you see I got a loose thread in there. That's okay. One of them won't hurt. Alright. Now last one. Notice here I've got 2 black pieces underneath is the nice yellow. Right on top of this, my last yellow piece. I'm going to go down right there. Alright. And one thing that I'm going to do on this, just to kind of remind myself, I'm going to take my darker pencil here, and I'm going to remind myself, this piece right here, I don't want stitches through there, okay? That's where I'm going to pull it through, and where I'm going to do my final stitch on the outside, and that's about 1 inch long, about 1 inch right there. Okay? I don't know if you could see that, but it's about 1 inch long. About 1 inch long right there. All right, and I don't want any stitch to go through there. Okay, so I'm gonna thread it again, and I'll get it started, and I'll show you kind of what it's looking like. Then I'll do it. One thing you can do if you want, you can actually start here and go all the way this way, all the way around here, come here, and then come back. But that's a long piece of thread to work with, so you might want to just do one section here, and then up here do that section. But it's up to you. So you can see I've got my next needle threaded, and I'm going to go through here right at the end of that, my little mark that I made. Start it off a little bit unbalanced there. Alright, come back through just so like I was doing before, a little bit behind it. And as it's getting pulled down into the gap. Go. And then just pull it tight. So my goal for this piece of thread right here is going to be to start on the end of here, bring it down to the last bottom of my pieces, right? And I'm going to try to get it through both ends there so it kind of overlaps, and then I'll bring it back up. And then I'll start here on this side and go down the long direction there. Alright, so I'm at the end here. See, I came down from my mark, came down to the end, and I'm about to turn around, but I thought, no, this end right here, maybe I could do something to help keep it a little bit closer together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each one of the sides. See there, going through there. And I'm just going to get through and make it a loop the whole way around, so it gets nice and tight in there. So you get through all the different sides, all the different pieces, and that way there's just a nice little choke point at the end. When I pull that tight, no rice is getting out of that end right there. Okay, just thought that was a nice little trick. And now I'm just gonna head back with my whip stitch. Make sure I don't accidentally catch one of the other sides with it. Head back with my whip stitch and get ready to tie this one off. So you can see I've made it back to my little mark here where the gap is going to be, and I'm just going to finish my stitch off. Alright, so do my last little bit of whip stitch here. It's tough going around that corner. That's okay. I got it. And I'm going to finish it off just like I've done on all the other ones. Alright. Do that there. Just a couple more whip stitches. Now the important thing is if you didn't leave a gap, right? So there's the gap in the thread. That's the only spot in the whole place that's got a gap. If you didn't leave that gap right there, what's going to end up happening is you're going to have no way to turn it inside out. So you'll have to cut the thread and back it up a little bit, all right? But that's not a super big deal. You just have to undo one of the sides and do it partially, all right? But here I'm going to finish this off real quick. And once, twice, 3 times if you're nervous. Pull it down nice and tight. And then I'm going to trim it. Trimmed. Make sure I put my needle back in here. I better not find any needles on the floor in my classroom, alright? So now I've got the whole thing. It's all sewn up the whole way around. Notice with this little gap right here, if I pull open on the inside, I can see that bright material in there. We'll start pulling it through. And be gentle, right? It's not going to be, you know, if it comes in through easily, your hole was probably too big. If you can't get it through, your hole was probably too small, right? But it just takes a little finessing, right? Got to be gentle with it, but little small tugs, and eventually, once it gets halfway through and the majority of the material comes, the whole thing will just pull on through. I think I might have made my hole just right. And as you do that, out it pops. And there you go. There's your ball. See, it's got the nice bright colors on the outside. It's got one little spot here that we'll do a cross stitch on later. Alright? But fill that up with rice. You got yourself a juggling ball. Alright? We're not going to fill the rice up this time unless you're really done and really bored, but you could probably just play dominoes instead. Alright. Have a good night.